Do you want to learn how to design and implement a brand new intranet using SharePoint Online? Well, if you do, watch this video where I'm going to show you the different types of web parts that you can get out of the box native inside of SharePoint to design an amazing looking intranet like this. And at the same time, I'm also going to explain the limitations of the out of the box option and compare that against a third-party paid-for solution by a company called Origami, who design really cool, modern-looking SharePoint intranets using SharePoint Online, but implementing their own bespoke web parts onto the homepage. So I'm going to be comparing the different features of out-of-the-box SharePoint against Origami and look at the pros and cons for both options. So the first category of design that I'm going to be looking at is carousels. Now, if you don't know what I mean by carousel, we mean like a slideshow, like something that's sliding, content, news, and information. Quite often it's found quite high up on the first homepage of your intranet. But as I say, it could be linking out to either internal resources or even external resources like news or files. So with the out-of-the-box SharePoint, the option we have is to use this news web part. So if I go into edit mode, you'll see that this is just a news web part that we've added to the page, which is then selected the carousel layout. With this option, you can choose how many news posts that you pull through, as well as the speed of that it will cycle through and whether you want it to automatically cycle through or not. Now, this is only going to be pulling out news-related content. So either news pages that you've created on the SharePoint site or a link to something else. So you could, if you wanted to, link it to a different type of resource or even a document if you wanted to. It could be a link to something external, but essentially it's pulling through content that it thinks are news pages. And that's how we can achieve this carousel look and feel. And this is completely out of the box from SharePoint. There's no customization or third-party products required. So that's probably the best pro, is that it is free, it's easy to use. But the downsides of this option is the way that you can configure it. Well, I don't mean necessarily configure, but the way that you add content to it can be quite long-winded. So if I just republish this page, I'll show you what I mean. So there's two ways we can get content into this slider. We click on new and we either go to news link. Now, as I say, this is expecting it to be a link to something that's news related. So I could put a link into here for, say, a link to a website, a news website like BBC or CNN or one of these other news websites, and it will automatically pull through the thumbnail image as well as the text as a summary, and then it will have a link that clicks off somewhere else. You could link this to another SharePoint page, which isn't even a news, or you could put it as a document or folder, but then you would have to go into the background, back end of this to actually add in like an image for it. So it can be quite a long-winded job. The other way is to click on new and then news post, and this is where you can then select a template. I'm going to select blank. You can give it a title, name, text, things like that, and that will then pull that content through into that news slider once I click on the post news. So it's more about where the content is being created from that it pulls up, and it's less about being configured in the actual app inside the web part itself. So now let's compare this to Origami, which, as I say, it is a third-party product that you have to pay for. Now, with this, we have this slideshow here, which is a lot more configurable. We can set this to auto slide if we wanted to, or we could manually slide through the different options. To configure this is just like configuring any web part in SharePoint. First, we need to edit the web page. Then we can scroll down, select the web part, click on the pencil, and the configuration options will appear. So we've got the options of setting whether we want it to autoplay and scroll around. We can set the speed of which it scrolls around in, how many slides we want to show. So maybe we want to show 3 or maybe even 4. And you can see it is responsive, so it's taking up the amount of space that it's given on the page. We can also go into changing things like the colors and the overall style of this. If we wanted to change the colors, we can do this really simply by selecting a different color from here or by putting our own hex reference into it. we would need to republish for the changes to then take effect. But the kind of the best thing I like about this is that we can add and remove posts directly from inside this web part. So within here, you've got all the configurations of exactly what you see. So when we're comparing this to the out-of-the-box news web part, the problem with the news web part is that it's designed for content which is going to be changing quite often. Every time you create a new news item, it's going to push something off the page. Whereas this option is much better for a kind of carousel of content which is going to remain reasonably static and it's not going to change too often. So it's better being used as a true navigation carousel rather than it being used as kind of a content like news that's sliding around. So it's really easy. We can add new rows in using this kind of table. We can choose what order we want it to show in, what the title will be. We can choose our own background image, the URL of where it's going to link to. Again, this could be internal or external. And there's also some targeting options, which I really like about this. Although with the out-of-the-box news web part, you can create targets. And what I mean by that is you can restrict who can see those links and those carousel slides to specific audiences of people based on security group. There's also some default ones built into this. So the one I really like is managers. So you have to be a line manager. People have to report to you for that managers one to appear. So this means you could create a carousel and you could have specific slides in there for managers as part of like a manager's toolkit. And only people who are managers will see that. Whereas there's a lot of time and effort has to go into building that audience if you were to do it out of the box version of SharePoint. So that's pre-built into there. So that I love that feature. That's really cool. So as I say, as a kind of third-party plugin option, I think this gives way more kind of control and configuration options. And it also has that audience targeting, which is way easier to use. So in this case, I've got to hand it to Origami. I think that if you're looking for a carousel, this is the better option. The next thing when you're designing out your intranet, you need to be thinking about navigation. Now, very commonly on an intranet, you will have a useful links area. Now, useful links can be linking to all sorts of different things, both internally inside of SharePoint and externally outside of it. So maybe linking to a payroll system, other types of portals and systems and things like that. Now, there's actually a number of different navigational options inside of SharePoint, but the most commonly used is a quick links web part. So let's take a look at that as an option for using that as our useful links. So going back to my out-of-the-box SharePoint intranet, I actually use the quick links web part in a number of places as part of this SharePoint design. You can see across the top here, this is actually using useful links, quick links web part, but also further down, I'm using it here and I'm using it here as well. Now there are a couple of different design layouts for this. So if I go into edit mode, I can select the web part, click on the pencil, and you can see I've used this button option. But again, there's a load of different options. We do have a compact view, a film strip view, a list view, tiles view, and a grid view. I think the button view looks the best, but there's a couple of different configurations even of the button layout. So we can do things like having the icons on the left, icons on the top, or no icons at all. I quite like the icons on the left, and also sometimes I like to play around with this, but you can have no outline, or you can have an outline box. Now I quite like this. Now if I was having less buttons, I would probably use this outline. But because I've got a number of different options here, I want it to kind of fit the size, the height of the carousel that's next to. So it'd look a bit weird now if I published and I had a few buttons that were pushing off the side of that. So in this particular design, I choose to have no outline. And then when I save, this actually fits quite nicely. But you can also have a fill color. So again, you've got those nice solid buttons and that looks really nice, especially if you're using that kind of solid block color on the right hand side in your section. Having the nice kind of like off-white buttons on top of that looks really nice as part of that design. Set this back to no outline. It's really simple to use this. We can add new links by clicking on add link inside of here, and we can add links into a couple of different areas. Now again, we can link to internal resources, external resources, anything that's got hyperlink, a URL, we can link to it. But this is a very, very commonly used web part as part of the intranet design. So now flipping back to Origami, and let's look at what options they offer. So there's actually a number of different kind of quick link options that they've got. One of them is inside of this header area here, and I really like this because this header looks so cool. And we can have quick links which take us directly off into each of those key areas that we have. But the other thing that I just wanted to draw your attention to, because, okay, this navigation, it's useful, it's got the useful quick links and things like that, and it works very similar to the way that quick links we were looking at before. But with Origami, they also offer another option which I think is really cool, and I just wanted to show you guys. It's this box here. Now, actually, these look like quick links that look like buttons, but actually it's generated from folders inside of the SharePoint site. So if I go into site contents and I go to, I think the library was called something like shared files that we set up. There we go. So shared files. So now you can see all of these folders actually show up on the homepage. And I just added one before called newsletters to test this out myself. And now if I go back to that homepage, you'll see that the newsletters button is then added into here. And it means that we have these really nice large buttons which are easy to use and obvious, simple to navigate. And by clicking into newsletters, I didn't actually upload anything into it, but then we can see the content that would be inside of that folder. So it's kind of dynamic, and I really like that, the fact that you can add these new folders and it would automatically appear on the homepage. So if it's navigating quickly different folders and you want to show up on the homepage, this is a fantastic way of doing it. And from a design perspective, I actually really like these large icons. We can put emojis and things like that into the folder names as well, so we can see them appear inside of these buttons. And I just think it's really good. And especially if you're looking for a really sleek, simple, obvious design, then this is a really good way to go. The other cool thing that you don't get with other quick link web parts is this search box. So we can use this to use this to search the content which is actually inside of each of these folders. So not necessarily that this is a like for like quick links, but often a lot of quick links are going to files and folders. So I just wanted to show you guys this because I think it's really, really cool. So actually this app is known as the Finder web part, and not only is it sort of looking for folders and things like that, but the Find app can show you, along with those quick links, it actually lets you search not only for links but also text within documents, and it shows a preview of the document. So I think that's something else that's really worth mentioning. So the next component of a SharePoint intranet design is about how you can promote events through your intranet. So there'll be all sorts of different events that will be taking place around your organization, whether it be webinars or online events. It could be physical events and conferences, get-togethers and parties, social events, and so much more. So you want to be able to easily make that information available to your users so they can see what events are coming up. So let's start off by looking at what SharePoint out of the box will offer you to communicate those events to your end users. So on our out of the box intranet, there is a web part known as Events. Now this allows you to create a new event really simply by clicking on this Add Event button. You can then fill this out just like it would be like an Outlook kind of calendar invitation. So if I was to type into here, say, maybe we're doing some SharePoint training, and it's going to take place on Wednesday the 6th of March at 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Where is it going to be? So it might be online, so we could post a link to it of where it's going to be, and what this will be called. Category, we might say that this is a meeting, and then we can put a bit of text in there about what it is. So we can say this is a training event. And then under here, we've got event participants, which I think is a bit misleading because this isn't people who are signing up as participants to the event. It's more like who are the event organizers. So you could type in someone's name into here. So maybe we could say it's George, who's going to be the person that's running this training. And then we will click on save. And that will then create us our little event. And it will quite shortly show up then in our events on here. Now, I should also mention the events has a couple of different layer options. So if I go into edit mode, first off, it is responsive. So it'll take up the room that we give it. So if I actually drag this into a much bigger area of my page, you'll see that it gets much bigger. We can also control whether or not we want it to be a film strip option or a compact view. What I quite like about using this film strip option though is that we also get this little button here, which is the add to my calendar button. So you can choose to then almost download a little file, which will then automatically, once you double click on it, you can add it into like your Outlook calendar as a reminder that that event is coming up. So I think that's really cool. I really like that option. So if I drag this back over here, I can put my events back over here, and you can see it will take up a short amount of space. We can also control where events are coming from. So I've set it that it's just coming from the events list on this site, but you also have a couple of options where you can specify specific SharePoint sites or all the sites in your hub, as an example. And then just by republishing it, we can then see my events start to appear on here. In fact, actually, I think I've added that to the wrong area. I just need to drag that back up again. And just put it between those two dividers. Now, there we go. Looks much better like that. So that's the out-of-the-box option for events. So let's go take a look at what Origami offer. So jumping back to our Origami site, what they offer is a bespoke events web part. Now, I really like the look of this. And in fact, actually, the pros of this, I would say, are essentially that it looks so much better than the out-of-the-box option. And actually, those categories that we selected, whether it's business or meeting, it shows on here and it color codes them, and it looks way better. One of the things I would say I kind of would fault about this is that you saw that you could easily add an event directly from the web part itself as an end user. You didn't have to go into the back end. So the downside of this, and unless I'm wrong, and maybe there's a config option somewhere to change this, but I've had a good play around with it. I couldn't find anything. But you seem to have to go into the back end of SharePoint through site contents. You then find the events list. So every SharePoint site comes with an events list, which is what the calendar runs on. You then go into events and you create your event through the events form in here, new event. So I added in SharePoint training in here, for example, and then that then appears back on the homepage. So that's kind of like a bit of a downside. And I suppose one point goes to out of the box SharePoint events web part in that sense, but they've redeemed themselves. And now I'm going to show you something which I get asked all of the time for when it comes to events. So do you remember when we were looking at the out-of-the-box events web part, and we had the option of kind of adding to your own calendar? You can do that using this events web part, but the cool thing about it as well is not only will, when you click on this RSVP button, it will allow you to add that to your own calendar. So click on RSVP, and it's going to add that as an .ics file, so I can choose to add that into my own Outlook calendar as a SharePoint training. But also, it's going to take a log of that. It might just take a minute or two to show up, but you'll see in the background of site contents this RSVP list, and when I click on that, it will show me the name of the event and who has actually said that they're going to attend. So this is groundbreaking. This is really good, and something I get asked about all the time for SharePoint is knowing about people signing up to events and who's going to be attending them. You could obviously extend this out further with SharePoint. You could maybe put some like totals together, so you could total up, say, group by the title of it, and then you could see how many people have actually chosen to attend that particular event. So this is way better than the out-of-the-box events web part. As I say, the pros and cons of it are the out-of-the-box one, you can add events directly from the web part on the homepage. However, what I think greatly outweighs that is the pro of the Origami option is that you can build in these RSVP options. However, the Origami events calendar has one really big feature that I really need to mention. In a single view, you can show events from any site and any list or any MS365 group, making it a one-stop shop calendar. The month picker can help show events from specific date ranges, and all permissions are respected. So if you don't have access to one of the events in a certain calendar, you won't see it. So that kind of makes up for a little bit of the fact that you're not necessarily creating the event directly through the app, because essentially that's the reason why the calendar won't let you enter it directly, because it doesn't know where it is that you're actually adding it. So the content is being added directly to the calendars and then rolled up through this app. I just wanted to pause for a second to ask a favor. If you're enjoying this video, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and ask any questions you have in the comments feed below. Also, if you're looking to advance your knowledge about how to build out a SharePoint intranet quicker, go and check out the membership options of my SharePoint channel, in which you'll be able to see a full training course on how to build out a SharePoint intranet. By going to my channel, and there'll be a link for this in the description as well, you can click on membership and you will be able to see that there's actually a whole bunch of different training courses in here. The first one is the fundamentals of SharePoint. And there's also then, once you've completed that, a step-by-step guide of building your own intranet in a 3-part series, which covers everything that we talk about in intranet design, as well as home pages and building out department sites. Also, as a member, you get access to a priority Q&A area. So any questions that you have which need a bit more detail, a bit more time from myself, you can use that as well to go and get your questions answered. So go and check that out after this video. So let's get back to it. And let's start off again by talking about feedback forms. So feedback forms are something that's very, very common and commonly required on a SharePoint intranet to give feedback on all sorts of different things. It doesn't necessarily need to be feedback on the intranet itself, although that is often used when you first launch your new intranet. You might want to get people's feedback on what they think about it, the design, the layout, what content they like or what content they think is missing. There's loads of things that you might want to add a feedback form to collect. It could be feedback about a project or a scheme or a new benefit or an event that you ran internally. There's all sorts of reasons why you might want to have feedback forms. So let's take a look at what you can do with the out-of-the-box SharePoint. So there's a couple of different ways you could achieve this using out-of-the-box SharePoint, but I'm going to show you the two most popular. So the first is that you can create a Microsoft form. So Microsoft Forms you can get to by going to office.com, and it's part of your Microsoft 365 subscription to build out basic forms. And they're really simple and easy to create. You can just add in new fields, or even it can give you suggested options for form fields as well. But you might also be using other types of third-party form software as well that you could embed into SharePoint in a similar kind of way that I'm going to show you. But actually, Microsoft Forms, you can natively integrate it into SharePoint. So it's really simple to do. We click on the edit button to edit our page. We scroll down to where we want to put the feedback form. So maybe down at the bottom up here. And then all you need to do is look for the Forms web part. So there it is, Microsoft Forms. We select that. And then all we need to do is click on, it just wants to refresh the page. So we just click on the pencil button and then we paste in the URL of the form that we've just created. Then we click on OK. It's a bit clunky, but I had to refresh the page. And then I can click on OK, and now my form appears. Now you can see that you have now got your form in here, but it's absolutely destroyed the design of the page because it's unnecessarily big. It's very large. You could try and drag it and drop it into a smaller area of the page, but you can see, to be honest, this web part, I don't know what's going on with it. It just keeps saying can't access forms, and it's just really kind of like buggy and quite unreliable at the moment. So I tend to not advise people to embed the Microsoft Forms directly into SharePoint, just because the user experience is quite poor. It just doesn't look great, and as I say, for some reason, whilst I've been trying to set this up as a little demo, I've had this sort of error on me for no good reason at all. So I don't think this is a particularly great example of how to embed a feedback form. Instead, what I often would encourage people to do from a design perspective is to add what they call a call to action web part onto the page and then choose to link that button to a feedback form somewhere else, whether it be a SharePoint feedback form, a Microsoft Forms, or even a third-party form. So that's a much better, more reliable way, and it's a smoother user experience. That, I would say, is probably the best way to do it using out-of-the-box SharePoint. But let's look at what Origami can offer as part of their package of web parts. So back on the Origami SharePoint site, if I scroll down to the very bottom, I have this feedback box which has been added to the page. Now, I think this is fantastic because it's taking up just about the right amount of space. It's quite obvious. I like the kind of text with the underline to make it obvious of what it is. And it's really short and simple. You can change the text to say, is there something missing on the homepage? Let us know. Or it could be another message, give us some feedback on something. And then you can click on submit my feedback, and that will then send that feedback as a piece of text along the way. So if it's just something that's a short free type bit, it's really simple to use. Again, if I just go into edit mode, we can see we've got the configuration options. So we can pump all of those feedbacks into a list. We can change what the feedback list is, and we can change some of the design options as well, the colors and the style of the web part. So I think this is really good. I think this is probably a much better option. When I first saw this, I actually thought, wow, do you know what I mean? There's loads of people that ask me about feedback forms in SharePoint all the time, and there's not really very good options available. As I say, the best option I usually tell people is the call to action web part, which links to a third-party form somewhere else, or a SharePoint list. But this just puts everything in one place. So I think, again, I've got to hand it to our Origami on this. I think this is the better solution. And then the final thing when you're thinking about designing your SharePoint intranet to think about is the social elements of your intranet. So an intranet really shouldn't just be a one-way street of communication. It should be factoring a couple of different elements of social input from users of your intranet. So with the out-of-the-box SharePoint, there's a couple of different options with that. We have the kind of news feed option. So you could create like a social sort of news feed, but as we've seen, it's quite clunky. To expect an end user to go and create a news article to then post, it's almost near impossible, to be honest. I just don't think it's realistic. People do need a bit of training to be able to know how to create news posts and be able to put proper content into them and make sure it looks good and that sort of thing. So I just don't think that's a realistic option. So then you've got other options of embedding out-of-the-box web parts for external social media platforms. So let's take a quick look at that. So back in my out-of-the-box SharePoint web part driven intranet, I can see I can go here and I can add in things like Twitter. So Twitter is natively integrated directly into SharePoint, although it's now known as X. So you can see you can put in your handle for your Twitter feed, and that'll pull things through directly from your Twitter feed. So that's good. As I say, if your Twitter for your organization is actively kind of in conversation with your users and they're retweeting things and that sort of stuff, it's a good way of getting that on there. But it's still missing that kind of like social board, that kind of like ability for someone to post something directly themselves. So let's go and have a little look at what Origami offer as part of their suite of products. So back on the Origami site, if I scroll down, you'll see that there's this little option here, which I've called it Staff Social. The web part itself is actually the Social Corner web part. So I think that's quite a good name, but different people want to call it different things. But this allows you to create your own post. And this isn't necessarily something like a big kind of feed and things like that, but just short little snippet things that you can allow your users just to post maybe about events which are coming up, or training things, or just things you want to shout about. Maybe you've won a contract, maybe you're raising some money for a charity, whatever it is, you can post on here. You can also allow users then to provide comments, and they could like the post. They can like each other's comments and reply to comments and things like that. But I think this is really cool, and I like the kind of layout of it. I like the design. I think it fits really well with this kind of modern looking intranet. And it's actually putting them the content into the hands of the user yet again. So we're taking out that kind of need to go off and create news articles for them to appear on the homepage and things like that. We're allowing people to put content directly on using this. And there's a couple of different kind of configuration options. Again, if I go into edit and then go down to Social Corner, click on edit web part, you can see we can show a number of different items. So if I just wanted to take this down and sort of show just 3, I can use this to set the number of cards we display. I would have to republish it for it to show up. And also who is allowed to post. So we can choose whether we want everyone to be able to post or only the actual page editors, the people who own the site. So again, if you didn't want to open it up for everybody, because not everybody does, then you can choose to turn that off. But I think the real selling value of this particular web part is the fact that you can allow anyone to post on it, which I think is really cool, and actually offers something that out-of-the-box SharePoint doesn't really offer at the moment. And again, you've got different things you can choose to show and hide different elements of it. If you wanted the title visible or not, whether you want the author to be visible or not, showing comments and hiding likes and all that sort of good stuff. So you can tweak and change the look and feel a little bit depending on the content and how you plan on using it. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, give the video a like and subscribe to my content. Subscribe to my channel for future content. If you're interested in some of those origami web parts, there's also a link pinned in the comments below, and there's also a link inside the description to go and find out more information about those web parts. But go and check them out. If you're interested in having a really cool modern intranet design and the out-of-the-box web parts maybe are not quite doing it for you, go and check these guys out because they're really good, really useful, so simple to install and download. It's also a one-off fee as well. There's no license costs for it, so go and check it out. And as I say, if you've got any questions, use the comments feed below. Thank you very much.